Welcome to 1850 Main Street, a place where friends get together and talk about their country and hope for a brighter future. Your hosts have built this spot over the past 40 years, meeting every day with people who are in the headlines and behind the real stories. Today, Rob Walgate and RNC Duncan from the Public Square are joined by David Zanotti, the CEO of the American Policy Roundtable.
Did Donald Trump's speech at the Republican National Convention tell us anything we didn't already know about him? Our friend, Dr. William B. Allen, thinks so.
So our good friend who joins us around the table in so many different places, including on the Public Square, Dr. William B. Allen, was in National Review recently. He was invited to do an op-ed piece, and he chose to write on the speech that Donald Trump gave at the convention. Alan, I'm watching you laughing just talking about this.
Well, again, we were talking earlier, things we didn't have on our bingo cards for this year. Mm-hmm. Dr. Allen writing a piece for the National Review about a Donald Trump speech was not on my bingo card, but I was glad to see it. It was interesting.
I was thrilled to see it, and we all read it. And I read the letter, the op-ed piece, much like a kid with a Christmas gift. I just wanted as fast as I could to get the box open because I wanted to know what was in there. Yeah. So I read it really fast the first time through. There's no savor in this at all. It was just, then what?
Well, for our listeners that want to read it, it's just called The Speech.
The Speech.
So if you go to nationalreview.com, it says William B. Allen, The Speech, and you can find it there.
And he says, right from the beginning, to call the speech unifying is an understatement.
Again, not something people typically say about Donald Trump, especially highly esteemed academics. You don't typically hear them say that his speeches are unifying.
No, you don't. But this Donald Trump maybe was a bit more subdued. We're talking about this speech happening, 5 days removed from an attempt on his life.
Yeah.
One of Dr. Allen's favorite words is artful. And he artfully says without saying the speech was way too long, way out of focus, and
it started too late at night too.
Well, By the way, can we just talk about this for a second?
Yes.
We do stuff at 1850 Main Street. We do stuff at thepublicsquare.com. We do stuff at the American Policy Roundtable. Okay, we do public policy for a living. And we have offices in multiple time zones. Okay. Now, one of the things that we do is consider time zones when we set up an event, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How can you run a convention in Central Time and run it on Central Time so that half the country east of the Mississippi gets everything an hour later than you're delivering it, which means you're starting at 9 o'clock, and by 10 o'clock, people are falling asleep, and you aren't even warmed up yet? Whose brainchild was that one?
Yeah, it ran late. My fear was I thought they were going to end up cutting Dana White and not let him go out there because I'm like, are they going to cut Dana White? But can you imagine if we're going to talk about the convention for a second before we get to the speech? Can you imagine being in another country, maybe tuning in and watching and seeing Hulk Hogan rip his shirt off in a political meeting?
It was a distinctly American moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then followed by Franklin Graham. It literally went Hulk Hogan and then Franklin Graham.
And then Kid Rock, I believe.
And then Kid Rock and then Dana White. It's
America.
Madness.
That is America.
That is America. And then you have Dr. W.B. Allen breaking it down. So we're going from the most base populist level, which I'm fine with. That's great. And then now we're up in the ivory tower to break it all down. That's America. Yeah.
So Dr. Allen does a great job talking about the speech. But what thrilled me, and this is a pure case of, I don't know, Dr. Allen and I have had the privilege of being friends for a long, long time. And he started off as a professor to me. And so he will always be Dr. Allen to me. He will always be a professor. So I will always be looking for a grade. So I was very excited when Dr. Allen decided to specifically pick out one of his favorite parts of the speech as the moment when Donald Trump went completely off script, which happened a lot, But one particular moment where it was like as far off script as he could go. And I'm not even back replaying the tape. I'm not even sure I can understand what might have triggered or prompted this. But maybe he was going through the different thank yous to people who had been there that night.
He might have just seen someone in the crowd.
Yeah,
might have just,
yeah, exactly. And he went back to the fact of Franklin Graham. And then he told the story of how Franklin Graham had sent him a letter urging him to stop swearing in his public speeches and pronouncements. And it was so sheepish. It was sort of like he got caught. Finally, somebody called him on it that he respected. And Franklin Graham had I don't know what sort of inspiration to write it in a letter. Well, the letter clearly got through and it got into Trump's hands. And Donald Trump actually, in front of God, Hulk Hogan, and all these witnesses, basically said, I got called on the carpet by Franklin Graham for swearing too much.
I like that that's the thing that Franklin zeroed in on, swearing. Of all the things Donald Trump has struggled with over the years, the swearing's the one we really need to focus on.
I would love to understand the dynamics in and behind that. But the fact was that the message got through. And Donald Trump was basically saying, I got to work on this. I really do. Yeah, he's right. I got to watch myself. Now, of course, all of this is in the context of the fact that people are looking for the new Trump post-assassination attempt, and they'd seen it all week. And here's another piece of evidence that maybe this guy's thinking about stuff he hadn't thought about in a long time or maybe never.
That certainly was my prayer for him the day that the assassination attempt happened.
Yeah. And we've talked also about the fact that if you're going to claim that Providence saved your life, you got to ask the second part of that question, what do I owe Providence in return? And, granted, no, your life comes from God. You're not saved by your works. No, I understand all that. But if God gives you a window of opportunity, it doesn't happen without responsibility.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what is really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to The Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast. Or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for The Lamppost. Find out what America is really talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
And this piece that Dr. Allen wrote almost seems to me that Dr. Allen was writing his own letter to President Trump.
That's interesting.
That if somebody got this to Donald Trump, Dr. Allen is calling him to his better angels.
And the Franklin Graham letter was just an example. Let me read that paragraph. The appeal for unity, therefore, is first and foremost a summons to recognize that the United States is not formed of oppressors and oppressed. That is the context, and that alone, in which an appeal for civility can gain any purchase. And that is difficult to achieve. Remarkably, though, the speech demonstrated what is required to accomplish so heroic a stance. What must count, but probably has not been noticed, as the most important passage in the entire speech was the casual and understated quotation of the request from Franklin Graham that Mr. Trump avoid swearing in his public pronouncements, followed by Mr. Trump's head-nodding acknowledgement that he understood the request and his jocular offhand remark that it could be hard to do.
Well, because he said it usually makes the joke better, or the story better.
That's what he said. Some of those words make the stories better. And I just thought that total moment of humanity was very fascinating about a man who's still thinking about his life. And the reason this is substantive to me is because there is a process in the human experience called habituation. We become accustomed to our environment, so much so that we can actually be changed to a reflection of that environment and not even realize it. We don't realize till we're way down the road. We may never, ever see it. It may be something that only somebody says in a commentary or an obituary or a comment at a funeral. And if the person was actually there to hear it, they would go, I never realized that about myself, because we've become habituated to the environment. happens with role playing. It happens with language. It happens with jobs. There's so many different ways that people get pressed into a mold. It is not common for someone at 78 years of age to be taking information about how they might be able to improve themselves. It's even less common for a former president to be taking that advice. But wait, there's more. And far less common for a multi-billionaire to be taking that advice. How am I doing, Rob?
Well, there are many yes people that surround people in the categories that you mentioned. Yeah. There aren't many people that are willing to step up to the plate and
say, excuse me.
Yeah. Give them a little truth. And obviously, the truth was received in that manner. Like, well, I have some flaws and I'm making some mistakes here. I need to do a little better. Or I need to at least try to do better.
You were talking about a time when Billy Graham appeared at a political convention.
Yeah. Was it 84 or 88? He appeared at both of them. He basically said the same prayer at both conventions. I thought, wow, how amazing is that? I mean, that's the one thing I did think when I saw Franklin Graham at the RNC. I was like, oh, are you going to get painted into one party? I would love if he went to the DNC and did the same thing.
Yeah, said the same prayer.
Same thing.
He'd probably go if he was invited, I would think.
I would guess that'd be the case. And there's some people who say, oh, if you go there. No, I think how many times our good friend Pastor John Bouquet says, I will preach from whatever pulpit is offered to me because the message will never change.
There you go.
Yeah, as long as the message is there and on there. Yeah. And I think the DNC, on the convention note, I think the DNC is probably going to have to find a way to move closer to the middle of the road to win some of those states that they want to win. Because the extreme leftist policies that they have, I don't know if they're going to parade those out there.
I'm almost certain there was also a convention that of a former, that a Catholic, may have been a Catholic cardinal or a bishop, may have been a cardinal, actually prayed at both conventions as well. So that's kind of interesting. So yes, Donald Trump was responding to all of the different people who presented that night, including Franklin Graham, who had the courage to acknowledge after Hulk Hogan that he had the toughest job in the entire convention, which is to follow Hulk Hogan. Again, I'm not exactly sure, along with the people who scheduled the timing of the event on the central time clock, might have exactly need a little help on order of speakers.
I heard one political commentator, I think it was Michael Knowles, make the point that perhaps Donald Trump was making a point in doing his speech so late and going for so long. It was almost signaling to Joe Biden, who was still in the race at the time, Joe Biden's probably been asleep for a few hours and can't speak for 5 minutes. But I am starting at 10:30 and I'm going to go for 90 minutes. There was almost a sense of like a show of strength in the planning of it. Maybe I've just heard people speculate.
God bless the rock star. I endured it and paid a price. All right, because we're in the business. Okay, so we didn't have a choice.
I fell asleep during it live. I'll admit I fell asleep. I watched the rest of it the next day, but I fell asleep live. We have a no boring rule. I mean, if what we're doing on the air or in a public presentation or in a trade text or a book or public is boring, it's out. I mean, their time is too precious to be bored. And I found the speech, I'm sure there was something in it for everybody. There's a lot of people if you're going to, try to get something in for everybody. And so it was. Could have been trimmed. It seems like it could have been trimmed.
Well, and that's been a problem. The theory to me is the most disrespectful thing you can do in a public setting is to out-talk the attention span of your audience. And the attention span of most audiences is somewhere in the 18 to 25 minute zone.
Which is sad.
Yeah, but that's the way we are.
But there it is, yeah.
That's what we've got. And there are people who would make the statement that a podcast of this length is too long because people stop at 8 minutes or 6 minutes, depending on what set of television programs they watched growing up as kids. They may have the Sesame Street attention span that's never really expanded.
But then you've also got, Joe Rogan and some of these other long for Lex Friedman and all these podcasts that go on for 3-4 hours sometimes. So it depends.
3 to 4 hours. There's a thought. 1850 Main Street. We could build an extension.
Well, that's talk radio or talk radio's 3 hours.
Talk radio is 3 hours with 35 minutes of content wrapped around by 25 minutes of commercials every hour.
That's why people like podcasts. Yeah,
me too.
Because it's mostly pure content. Yeah. And I mean content in the good sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So the speech, the reason we wanted to highlight the speech was to give credit where credit's due to our good friend, Dr. William B. Allen, who never ceases to amaze in his discerning capacity and his genuine affection for human beings, all human beings, in the fact that he's trying to help us in the journey to get better.
On that very note, can I read one more quote from his article?
Sure.
He says, the speech did not offer a unity that papers over differences. Instead, it summoned the resolve to persevere through our differences without persecuting those who differ. That is more than unity. It is a recognition of a common good beyond different interests. I love that part.
Now, if we could just get some politicians to figure out what he's talking about, we'd be a lot better off. But our thanks to William B. Allen for letting us talk about him. I told him that we were going to put this speech out there, and I want anyone can go to National Review and take a look at it. It's well worth the time. It's very brief. It's about an hour and 85 minutes shorter of a read than the Trump speech transcript.
Well, and he was bringing the cookies to the bottom shelf for all of us as well. We've all read some of his academic works.
For that, it was a reach.
We've all read some of his academic stuff.
Read it twice. You will not be sorry. I still was picking stuff off the shelf a third time through.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.